So I think we should get started now, since it's 5 minutes after the hour, or even more, 6 minutes after the hour. So welcome everyone to the COAR Forum on COVID-19 Open Science and Repositories. I just give you a brief overview. First of all, the session is being recorded, so please note that anything you say will be available to others afterwards. And we're asking that people who are not presenting keep themselves muted during the forum, so we don't have any background noise. And I'd like to give you just a very brief overview of what the program for the forum. I'm going to give a very brief welcome and overview, as I'm doing now. We'll have a presentation about 3 different projects related to open repositories and COVID-19, followed by a short presentation by myself about COVID-19 and open science. After each presentation, we'll open up for questions for about 5 minutes in the chat. So if you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat, and then we will read out those questions to the presenters. And then we'll have an interactive session at the end using the Mentimeter program, which I'll give you a few more instructions about in a minute. So just very briefly, again, welcome to the forum. This forum is hosted by COAR, which we are the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. And we're an international organization, association that brings together repositories and repository networks to build capacity, align policies and practices, and act as the global voice for the repository community. So we're very pleased to have you at this forum today. I also wanted to briefly mention some recommendations for the management of COVID-19 resources and repositories that COAR published on June 15th. These are available on our website, and the recommendations are really about basic practices for managing resources, and in particular, basic recommended metadata elements for resources. So of course, there are a number of other type metadata elements that could be used and added to repository records to enhance this, but we're recommending these as a very basic initial start. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be using Mentimeter for the interactive session after the presentations. So we will ask you to go to this website, www.menti.com, and input the code. You don't have to do it now. I just want you to be aware of that. And the code will be at the top of my Mentimeter slides when we move into that interactive session. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our first speakers who will be talking about the OpenVirus project. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so they can load their slides. We have Dr. Abreen Hamadani, Dr. Geeta Yadav, and Dr. Peter Murray Rust. And I welcome them and thank you so much for agreeing to present at this forum. And I hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you once again. It's a pleasure to be here today presenting at the COAR. I'm Geeta Yadav. I'm a lecturer at the University of Cambridge, UK. I'm also a group leader at the National Institute of Plant Genome Research in India on a joint appointment between the 2 nations. Today, I'm here to tell you about the online internship program for extracting knowledge from literature that me and my collaborator, Peter Murray Rust, he's also here with us today, and he's from Cambridge, both of us evolved at the India-UK interface during the COVID-19 pandemic. The program, as Kathleen has just mentioned, is called OpenVirus, and we started 3 months ago with just 2 interns. And in the past 3 months, we've expanded to over 15 undergraduates, graduates, master's students, as well as PhD students who have all come together to work across boundaries of rural, urban geographies, nationalities, language barriers, and so on. The atmosphere is completely electric in OpenVirus, and in the last 3 months, our group of interns in India and other global volunteers, of course, have made great progress with OpenVirus. We've built a community based on collaboration and communal values, B, an open platform independent client-side technology, C, semantic resources on viral epidemics, not just COVID, D, a dictionary system based on Wiki Data, and finally, most importantly, multilinguality. And this last bit is really important because some of our interns came from the remotest parts of rural India with no prior experience of speaking in English or even access to laptops, leave alone high-end workstations, which we usually connect with, online internships, computational work, and so on. But we've loved the way all of these kids have found ways to learn and motivate each other in their own ways. Personally, Peter and I have both been surprised beyond our wildest dreams that these students have been able to achieve so much in such a short time, and they are the real heroes of OpenVirus. One of our interns, Ambereen Hamadani, will now tell you more about the science that we've been doing, and as well as the challenges that we have faced and so on. But I am here to just say that we would love your input and support to expand this OpenVirus community into a greater, larger global community. In this effort, till now, we have been helped greatly by national and international avenues and organizations, as well as different people. For example, we've had the RC UK funded Tigris program at Cambridge. In India, we've been supported by the Indian National Young Academy of Science, of which I'm a member. And this academy connected us to the Department of Science and Technology with the government of Rajasthan. And they had a COAR program, which is an acronym for knowledge augmentation through research in young aspirants. And these are students who could not undergo a regular summer training due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the idea of online mentoring came up as an experimental alternative. The best part was that the CARIA students connected with and were mentored by other students in the group that Peter and I have been able to mentor over the last 3 months, especially the students or the interns who were selected nationally in India through prestigious programs of the Indian Science Academies like the Summer Research Fellowship Program, the FAST SF program. Ambereen herself is one of these nationally selected fellowship holders, but all of this is mere paraphernalia. Over to Ambereen for describing the science that we do. Ambereen, your turn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I'm going to take you through the technicalities of the OpenVirus project. Essentially, the question that we're asking and answering is, can repositories fight and help in fighting viral epidemics? So all science is essentially based on new and exciting ideas. It is these ideas that when they go into scientific literature, they become more tangible. And after this scientific literature is compiled into repositories, it becomes a gold mine. And it is this gold mine, if mined properly, can lead to new and exciting ideas, insights, which can go back into science and give new and massive breakthroughs. So that is where we step in. We are here to try and find useful insights from repositories and put them back into science, so that something tangible and something great can come out of it. As we all know, scientific open access is a huge deal these days. Lots of papers are coming into publication. For example, 8.5 million papers have already been published in scientific open access. Among them, in the biomedical field alone, nearly 1 million papers are published per year in the PubMed Central database alone. And this is increasing at the rate of 8 to 9% per year. To say nothing of the COVID publication explosion. The bioRxiv and medRxiv alone are saying that nearly 10 papers are being published every day after the COVID explosion. And since the first case of COVID was confirmed, within the first 4 months of that first case, nearly 16,000 publications came out in the open. All this is leading to a huge publication deluge, and nobody knows where to start with and how to handle this kind of a publication deluge. Therefore, it is largely impossible to read all this information, to conclude anything substantial from it, or to make informed decisions without data. This is true both for scientists as well as non-scientists. So we stepped in and we derived our inspiration from Ranganathan. And we believe that his ideas, and his values are true in this century as well, which can be largely translated into repositories. We believe that repositories are for everyone, everywhere. They save the time of the reader, and a repository is a growing communal organism, which is very important. We believe in knowledge justice in science and medicine. We believe very firmly that knowledge and science and everything related, especially to science and medicine, should not be monopolized, and it is nobody's monopoly. Our vision is pretty straightforward. We believe in scraping the repositories, annotating them properly, and conducting full text searches in order to come up with something insightful. And for this purpose, we believe that the entire pipeline should be so smooth that the person should be able to work on local machines or on mobiles, or even in the remotest parts of the world wherein the internet connectivity could not be as good as it is in the rest of the world. So the OpenVirus, largely what it does is that it scrapes important repositories. Our primary repository is the Europe PMC repository. The OpenVirus scrapes the papers within that repository, cleans them, annotates them with the help of dictionaries, and then displays them in a very coherent and simple manner so that it can be understood by citizens at large, and then this data can be published further. We are essentially endeavoring to extract pearls from an ocean of knowledge. There are a number of tools that we are using for this project, and one of them is the starting point would be GetPapers, which is a new state-of-the-art scraper for downloading scientific literature. For any query that you put in GetPapers, you will get metadata as well as full text from that repository. And GetPapers is capable of downloading hundreds of papers per minute. And like I already told you, our primary repository is the Europe PMC repository, which is the open life science publication. So together, these two form faceted mini corpora. And we will talk about the faceted mini corpora in a while. Another very essential tool that we use is Wiki Data. We perform Wiki Data-based annotations. Now, Wiki Data is a central storage for structured data. It contains the world's metadata, and we are tapping into the potential of Wikidata by transforming Wikidata into dictionaries. So this is one of the queries, one of the Sparkle queries that we have made in order to get useful results from Wikidata. So what essentially are dictionaries? Dictionaries are ontologies which identify words and phrases within documents. These dictionaries we use later after creating them, after maintaining them for further search using other state-of-the-art tools that I'll discuss later. Our dictionaries endeavor to extract multidisciplinary knowledge about viral epidemics and not just COVID-19 alone. So we have endeavored to create dictionaries with regards to countries, diseases, drugs, funders, viruses, testing and tracing during viral epidemics, zoonosis. Zoonosis is essentially the mechanism wherein diseases can be transmitted from animals to humans or vice versa. They can be transmitted from humans to animals as well. And all that comes under zoonosis. And non-pharmaceutical interventions, we are now starting to realize how important non-pharmaceutical interventions like masks, social distancing, etc. are one of the very important thing about our dictionaries, like Geeta ma'am already said, is that they are multilingual. Multilinguality enables empowerment of the global south. We are trying to incorporate terms from languages like Urdu, Hindi, Tamil, even Sanskrit into our dictionaries so that they can be all encompassing. We are also trying our hands at other languages, foreign languages like Spanish, etc. And currently, with the help of these 8 dictionaries, we have already created more than 5,000 terms into our dictionaries. So this is what a dictionary primarily looks like. This is a typical dictionary that was created using a Sparkle query and then converted using AmiDict. On a closer look, we can see that this dictionary contains multiple important terms about everything that the dictionary should contain. For example, this one is about the countries. So it contains the description of the country, the name of the country, its Wiki Data ID, its Wiki Data URL, its Wikipedia URL, and so much more. There is also provision for including synonyms of the country into each and every dictionary. And like I told you, our dictionaries are multilingual. And as you can see, this particular dictionary has terms from Tamil as well as Hindi inbuilt into it. After the dictionaries are fully created, we can move on to perform full text searches on the dictionaries. But before that, sometimes article sectioning may be very important. For this, we use journal article tag suite, which cuts the paper, which sections the papers into relevant categories so that they can be used further. Now, before I move any further, Geeta ma'am has already given you a perspective of how our teams began. So it began with Dr. Peter Murray Rust and Dr. Gitanjali Yadav having a vision, which they wanted to translate into something useful for the society. Soon they were joined by two interns, Priya and Karina. And as it happens with all good things, our team grew and a few more of us joined. And we began working. It so happened that multiple other people were interested in our work and they joined us too. And since we were a tad more experienced because we joined earlier, we were given the responsibility of being mentors to them. Thus began the amazing mentor-mentee relationships. We formed mini teams within our big team. So then, as our teams became manifest, as our teams became stronger, we endeavored to work on mini projects. Now, within these mini projects, we formed faceted mini corpora, wherein we used Get Papers and Europe PMC to form faceted mini corpora on topics like viral epidemics and country, viral epidemics and disease, viral epidemics and drugs, viral epidemics and funders, viruses during viral epidemics or viruses causing viral epidemics rather, testing and tracing during viral epidemics, the role of zoonosis in causing viral epidemics and how it can be controlled, non-pharmaceutical interventions during viral epidemics to contain the viral epidemic. A typical Europe PMC search would give you around 19,000 papers on viral epidemics. This we split into facets, but we limited our searches to 1,000 papers so that we could download the papers on our local machines and work without problems. One of the tools that we used through the entire process was AMI. Like I said, we performed full text scientific searches, and AMI was the primary tool that helped us achieve that, and still is. So AMI is a toolkit for full text scientific search. It takes in the entire paper, cleans and filters it, transforms it into article sections, performs full text search on it with the help of the dictionaries created, and gives very useful results as well as inferences. It gives full text searches, co-occurrences, plots and graphs, data tables, summary, frequency tables, and a lot more. So like I told you, we maintained, created the dictionaries, we worked with AMIs, and then we formed the faceted mini corpora. All these things together are capable of giving results in the form of dashboards and data tables. These are clear, easy to understand, and the entire concept behind the published papers is very easy to grasp. These dashboards and data tables are critical in drawing inferences and understanding the patterns that are occurring during viral epidemics. We also are taking it one step further by incorporating various state-of-the-art machine learning techniques into the system. So one important belief of our team is that we work in the open. We believe everything should be open for anybody to use, reuse, and build upon. So we meet bi-weekly, of course, virtually, but our meetings are abuzz with new ideas. We update our progress openly and we show it to the world. This is a screenshot of the GitHub page of our project, which is updated in real time. We update all our progress as we go along in our work. I already told you about 8 mini projects. All of them are available online. We have 8 open dictionaries as well. And we believe in keeping our progress report online too. So this is a screenshot of our progress report, which we update as time passes. And it not only encourages others to do well, but it also inspires us to work harder. So the mini projects are essentially there for gathering insights. We are trying to gather insights regarding important questions like what countries are more prone to viral epidemics, what diseases co-occur with viral epidemics, are there any drugs which can be used for treating these viral epidemics or treating the diseases caused by viral epidemics, what funding agencies are at the forefront for funding the research on viral epidemics, what are the pharmaceutical interventions and their effects in containing viral epidemics. Also, what are the viruses responsible for causing viral epidemics in the first place? And what is the role of zoonosis? And how can it affect the spread of viral epidemics at large? And of course, once the viral epidemic has spread, how can testing and tracing contain it? This is a result. This is a multi-dictionary search dashboard result. As you can see, multiple dictionaries have been used on many papers to get useful inferences from each paper. On closer look, you can see that it gives us the frequencies of which disease is being used more often within a particular paper, which country it appears in, and which is the funding agency. Of course, this is only an example. It can be expanded to more dictionaries as well. Now, our endeavors through our many projects yielded some very common terms that we could spot in many papers, and it led us to believe that the drugs more commonly used are ribavirin and oseltamivir during viral epidemics. The countries that find mention in many papers are China in the recent papers and USA. A lot of diseases are also finding their mention, of course, and among them influenza and chikungunya are finding mention in many papers. With regards to tracing, infection, treatment, and detection are the words that are very often found in such papers. World Health Organization, National Institute of Health, and Center for Disease Control and Prevention are the three funding organizations that seem to be at the forefront of all the funding, of a lot of funding. So with regards to the test, heme agglutination and neutralization tests appear to be very popular. And the viruses, HIV finds its mention globally across all nations. And with regards to the tropical viruses, Zika, dengue, and West Nile viruses are pretty common. So here is an overview of what repositories can potentially tell us. This is a graph of viral diseases that occur in India. And as you can see, it's easy to visualize which disease is more common in which area, and this can be extrapolated to other countries as well. So here is a bar diagram of a number of countries. The countries are represented by color in each in each bar, and as you can see, multiple diseases can be seen affecting multiple countries, and this can also be visualized using the co-occurrence. This is the co-occurrence of diseases with regards to countries. Here, on a closer look, we can see that some countries have certain diseases occurring at a more frequency than other countries, and this is a very useful inference that can help in the containment of those diseases, in understanding the patterns that are actually causing viral epidemics. Like I already told you, we are also taking it one step further by incorporating machine learning into our work. So through machine learning, we are essentially asking important questions like, how good is the EPMC search in the first place? So we annotated hundreds of papers for false positives, meaning these were the papers that came out in the search for viral epidemics, but were not essentially about viral epidemics. These papers became our false positives, and we used this data set to build multiple machine learning models. One such machine model gave us this confusion matrix, and we are still working on improving our results, improving the precision of our results, and improving the results so that the predictions can be relied upon. We are also endeavoring to ask and answer new questions. Can we find patterns that prevent and control pandemics? Understanding what happened in the past, can that lead to fewer and fewer pandemics in the future? That is the big question that we are trying to answer. So this is our team. Our team spans India, USA, I beg your pardon, India, UK, and China. And here are a few more members of our team. It is very heartening to tell you that our team is growing with every passing day. We are being joined by people from across the globe, and they are coming up with new and vibrant ideas. So these are useful links to all the things that I told you. We have a main GitHub repository, and here is a link to that. And we have also made many videos and presentations with regards to our work, which is also available in the open. And here is the link to that. Again, I reiterate, our inspiration remains firm. We believe that repositories are for everyone, everywhere. Repositories save the time of the reader, and the repository system is a growing organism. It is a communal organism. We believe in knowledge, justice in science, and monopoly, and we would try our hardest to never make it anybody's monopoly. For the future, we plan to take our knowledge to encompass the climate knowledge, and also to try and mine other databases like the Redalic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta and Ambreen and Peter. Peter, is there anything else you'd like to add to the presentation? You're on mute.
This is Ambreen's first scientific presentation, and I think she's done brilliantly. She's put in a great deal of work, and the work that you've seen here is being created by all the interns and Ambreen, and they have put the slides together. Geeta and I haven't done anything, so it's their work. We've just facilitated it.
No, this is extremely impressive. And as I don't see any questions at the moment in the chat, maybe I'll just go ahead with a couple of questions, comments, and I welcome Geeta, Ambreen, or Peter to answer whoever is most appropriate. I think one of the things that's of interest to COAR is that, as you said, Ambreen, at the end of your presentation, how can we bring in the content in a distributed network of repositories rather than relying on one central repository of PubMed Central? And I'd be interested to know, I mean, one of the things that COAR is trying to do is to create interoperability across repositories so that it would be easier for scientists like yourselves to text and data mine and use that content in new and innovative ways. So I'd be very interested to know what you think could be done on our end as repository management organizations to improve access to the content in the distributed network of repositories.
So if I can take that one, because I've had quite a lot of experience of this, I think the key things are, A, that repository owners and funders and so on must see the power of this. I think many people see repositories as a deposit rather than a distribution mechanism. So many repositories are actually quite difficult to get things out of. And so I think repositories need to come up with a scheme for the reuse of repositories and try and get that systematized. I'll certainly be very interested to see what OpenAIRE and the other repositories do. But it really is the key thing to get documents so that you don't have to know where they are. That's the real thing. When you search Europe PubMed Central, you don't know which journal it was published in. You just ask the question, whatever it might be, Zika, and it gives you that. So we need a system where there's a single point of entry to the repository system where you say, give me all the theses in the world which are about Zika or about COVID or whatever. The reader shouldn't have to do the work of finding out where the things are. The system should be able to give that to the reader. So that's my little bit of rant.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. And I think that's something we need. I mean, that's part of the next generation repository recommendations, I believe, are how to support machine access and direct access to content. But there's a lag time between those recommendations coming out and the implementation of those technologies into the repository platforms. And that's what we're working on now. And I guess, here's a question in the chat from Errol, and I'll read it out to you. Have you encountered any legal challenges in the process, more specifically any copyright related threats from the side of publishers?
So can I take that one again? This is my specialist subject. In terms of Europe PubMed Central, no, because almost everything in Europe PubMed Central is either CC BY or sufficiently free that it can be reused. There is much less clarity in things like university repositories, because there you may be able to access the document, but there are restrictions about reusing it. And libraries are often very concerned about saying that you can actually text mine this. They can let you read it, but not necessarily text mining. But in the wider world, there is massive pushback from the publishers in having journals being read by machines. They put in technical opposition, they put in political opposition. We've been fighting for this in Europe, and the publishers have put in a lot of work to try and stop legislation that facilitates access to full texts, even when there is a legal right to do so. So yes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas that institutional repositories need to spend more effort and energy on. And I like your model, by the way, of bringing in students to try to help curate,
yes,
curate metadata and content, because I think that model could also work at the level of the institutional repository. I think we probably have to move on to our next presentation, but I'd like to flag one other thing that you mentioned, which I think is something very important for COAR, as well as this whole issue of supporting content in other languages, and how we need to start thinking about how we can translate content back and forth from local languages into English for international scope, and then back into local languages again, because it's so important for local communities to be able to have access to the research content relevant to them. So I like the aspect that you're looking at that, and maybe we can follow up with you around some of that offline after this forum. And the final thing I wanted to say is thank you again for this wonderful presentation. What you guys are doing is really interesting and innovative, and you have a growing community, and maybe one of the things we can learn from you is what you're doing, how it can be applied in other contexts. And again, I'd like to follow up with you guys after the forum to see if there's possibility for collaboration beyond India and China.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been talking to Ariana Betheril Garcia in Redalyc, and we hope to make all of our technology available. And we don't want to tell people how to do it. We just want them to develop, if you like, the Latin America way of doing it, or whatever other country, the Indonesian way, whatever.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Geeta, Ambreen, and Peter. And I'd like to, maybe you could stop sharing your screen now, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Alicia Bardi from OpenAIRE, and she's going to talk about the OpenAIRE COVID-19 Gateway. So I turn it over to you, Alicia.
Yes, thank you. So you should be able to see my screen now. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You're not in full
Yes.
screen mode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I am. Okay. So yes. So I'm Alessia Bardi, and I'm in the technical team of OpenAIRE. And today I'm going to describe what we have done, what is the OpenAIRE response, the OpenAIRE activities to help the fight against the COVID-19. Okay, sorry. So OpenAIRE is the open access infrastructure for research in Europe, but our focus is also open science, not only open access to publications. So we have been funded by the European Commission since FP7, and we have become a legal entity. So you're going to hear our names and our activities for a long time. And why? Okay. So our actions are organized in 3 pillars. So policies, training, and services. From the point of view of the policies, we support the national and international alignment of open access and open science policies, but also alignment on interoperability guidelines for repositories. We offer face-to-face and virtual trainings to researchers on different aspects of open science. So open access to publications, open access to data, but also data management plan and legal issues. We have a number of experts in several topics which are important for the efficient application of open science practices in scholarly communication and research in general. And then we have the technical services, which actually supports the implementation of the open science principles. And most of these services are, let's say, built on top of the OpenAIRE Research Graph. And what is this? The OpenAIRE Research Graph is an open metadata research graph of interlinked scientific products described with several metadata fields. And among them, we have the information about the access rights, the information about the funding, so the funders and the projects, and research communities and infrastructures that produced or are important for the product. So as you can see, the idea of the graph is that we have these entities of the research life cycle that are all linked together. So a research product, which can be a publication or a research data, a research software, or also other types of research products. And I'm thinking about, for example, workflows or protocols. So all these products can be linked to their projects, their community, their infrastructure, and there is an organization behind it, either because it's the funder or either because it's the affiliation of one of the authors, for example. So all these relationships that exist between these entities are labeled so that we can understand the semantics of these relationships and we can understand the context of a specific research activity. And how do we build this graph? We build it by collecting metadata, links, and full text from a lot of content providers. So we collect directly from more than 10,000 sources from all over the world. So even if we are based in Europe, in fact, we have content from all over the world. And we have strong connection with Latin America, for example, but also with Korea and Japan. So here you can see some of the most important or biggest sources that we include in our graph. So ranging from for example, information about open repositories from OpenDoor and Wiki Data, but also information about the organization from GRID-AC, projects from the European Commission, but also from national funders like the National Funder for Portugal, for example, or Germany, and Croatia, and so on. We have the OIJ, which is the Directory of Open Access Journals. We have Crossref, PLOS, and so on. You can see a lot of sources here. And this is what we do with all this content. So we start from the data sources that are OpenAIRE compliant. So they are mainly institutional and thematic repositories, which export their metadata according to the OpenAIRE guidelines, which is a set of guidelines, of course, that support the interoperability among the repositories. So it's useful not only for us to aggregate their content, but also for them, because they can also have provide seamless access to their record also in other cases. So we aggregate their content, and we also add the content from ORCID, Crossref, Unpaywall, Microsoft Academic Graph, and Scholar Explorer, which provides link between research data and publication and scientific literature. We put everything together to create our first version of the graph, which is the raw graph. Why it's raw? It's raw because it contains duplicates. Because as you can imagine, we collect different metadata records about the same entity from different places, from different repositories. So we have to find these duplicates. And we apply some technique to identify the duplicates and to basically merge them together into one record, so that when we, at the end of the chain, we calculate statistics, we count the same publications or the same data sets only once. And as you can imagine, this is very important for monitoring purposes. Once we have the deduplicated graph, we can start really applying some mining technique to extract knowledge that is hidden. So I forgot to mention before that we are also able to take the full text of open access publications, and currently we have about 10 million full text of open access publications in our system. So we apply full text mining technique to extract additional information. So for example, affiliations or subject classification, links to projects, links to data sets. So information that is not available in the original metadata. Citations also. And we try to do the same also from the metadata itself, because sometimes the information is there, it's just that it's not so explicit as it would be. And also because, especially for data sets, their metadata is very poor. But if they are linked to a publication, then we can somehow propagate this information from the publication to the data sets, so that we can enrich also the metadata of the data sets. Finally, we have the post-cleaning step, which means that we basically check again that all the values are compliant to controlled vocabularies. And we use several vocabularies defined by COAR. So like the vocabulary for resource types and the one for access right, for example. So we ensure that those fields contains values that are compliant to the vocabularies, so that finally we produce the OpenAIRE research graph, which is analyzed by our tools to produce statistics that we show in our service, which is called Monitor. And also we index this content on a full text index, which is based on Solr. And this is used to serve our portals, so the Explore portals and the Connect gateways, and our APIs that developers can use. So here you can see that we have 140 million research outcomes in our graph today. And when we decided to do something for COVID-19, we thought, okay, how can we find research outcomes that are relevant for COVID-19 or coronavirus in general? Can we, set up a simple default search, or maybe we can exploit some advanced search that we already have? In which fields of the metadata we should look into, and which search terms we should adopt? Because, none of us is really a medical doctor or a researcher in medicine. So it was difficult for us to find the right things to do to find these things in the graph. So we say, okay, if maybe just a simple query, a predefined query is okay, and we can get everything that we have related to coronavirus. But also, how can we know? How can we be aware of the sources that we should include and that are targeting COVID-19? So given these questions, we tried to give some answers, and we built our approach involving the domain experts. So we had a call for experts that we looked for experts among researchers, librarians, research managers, so experts in the fields. And we create a list of data sources that are explicitly targeting COVID-19 and coronavirus. And we keep it updated thanks to community suggestions. So we have a form that you can use to suggest new sources. And these experts are not only helping us in keeping this list and shaping this list, but they also help us to set up and think about different ways of identifying research outcomes for COVID-19. So we had an extensive set of keywords that we could use. We have been pointed to specific subject classification schemes. And we apply these to our full text mining algorithm. In addition, we are able to find relevant research outcomes by exploiting the links between publications, datasets, and the funding projects, because we are also able to identify which projects are targeting coronavirus research on coronavirus. So the publications that are outcomes of these projects are relevant. So this is something that we also use to identify relevant publications. But then something always is not sorry. There is still something that is not included. And so we have a way to manually add research outcomes which have not been identified with the previous processes, which are automatic processes that runs on the graph. Finally, we set up the COVID-19 Gateway so that all these research outcomes are made available via a single dedicated entry point. So you don't have to go into our generic Explore portal and perform specific searches on your own. You go there on COVID-19 OpenAIRE.eu and you find everything that is related to coronavirus. So in this slide, you can see in point 1 what I just described. So using existing repositories and mining for COVID-19, we have set up a Zenodo community to support researchers at the deposition of datasets, publications, protocols, any types of research products. And this is used a lot. we included additional sources that we haven't included in the graph before. So we really expanded our base of information. And after the gateway, we also made available the data that we collected, so the metadata via our APIs and via a dump that is available on Zenodo. And this is how the gateways look like. So the homepage, you have a summary where you can see the curators, so the people who help us doing this and specify the processes that we need to identify the products. You can see that the curators selected the 130 projects that are in the thematic of coronavirus, 15 content providers, and 7 Zenodo communities. And on the right, you can see the list of a part of the list of subject. And at the top, you can see an about menu where you can have more information about the sources and methodology. You can know who are the curators and other information that could be useful. If you go to the search, we can search for the publications, and we can apply some faceted search to fine-tune what you're looking for. So for example, we can search for we can browse by access mode, by type of research product, by year, by funder, by type, by language, by community. And this is very interesting because it shows different research communities that are working on the same topics. So for example, it should be interesting to see these 100 publications on transport research, which are also related to COVID-19. And finally, you can browse by content provider. So from let's say it's the provenance of the record, from where we collected it. And we can do the same for the data sets, for the software, and for other research types, of course. So here again, the different browsing that are available on the website. So finally, yes, the dumps on Zenodo. So 100 downloads so far. And from, yes, it was since August, mid-August. And on the website, when you search, you can also download the results on a CSV. So you will get some basic information about the research product, like the title, the authors, the DOI, if available, the journal where it was published, and so on. So you can also get instead of having the whole dump, you can just do a search and download the part of the search that you find useful for your research. I think the slides will be shared after this meeting, so you will find here some links that are relevant, so you can go there and learn more about what OpenAIRE is doing for COVID-19 and for open science in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alessia, for that really interesting presentation. And every time I see a presentation about OpenAIRE, I learn a little bit more. So I'd like to ask, first of all, are there any questions from participants? If there are, please put your question in the chat. For Alessia, we're running a little bit late, but not super late, so I think we can take 5 minutes for questions. And maybe I'll get us started while other people are thinking of their questions. So Alessia, do you have a sense of how the OpenAIRE COVID-19 Gateway is being used? Who are the users? Are they mainly funders who are looking to track their COVID-19 research outputs, or do you have a sense at all? And if so, who are the users of the Gateway?
okay, I cannot really say who are the users because the access is open. So there is the possibility to log in, but it's not mandatory. So I cannot really say who they are. Based on the questions that we receive on the help desk or via mail in these days, I think that project managers are interested in looking at if there are COVID-19 related publications among the publications of the project. And also, I received several requests to get the numbers and the publications by country. So, and this is something that we are currently working on. It's a work in progress, but we are trying to enrich our metadata with information about the country according to different criteria. And we will soon add the possibility to browse by country in our portal so that we will make life easier for this person, to these people to check what is related to Italy, what Spain, and so on.
Thank you. Any other questions from the participants? I should mention that this forum that we're having now is a continuation of a discussion that we had at Open Repositories. And I think we may continue the discussion and bring in some other projects as well in a third iteration of this. Okay, well, if there are no questions no more questions for Alessia, I'd like to say thank you very much again for participating in our forum. And again, obviously the discussions we have around interoperability, OpenAIRE is a crucial voice in those discussions, and we look forward to continue working with OpenAIRE around these issues of international interoperability in the future.
Yes, thank you very much, Kathleen.
Thanks, Alessia. And now I'd like to move on to our third presenter, who is Jeff Harder, representing the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, the University of Alberta, and he is one of the co-chairs of the Canadian Open Repository Working Group. And he's going to talk about a Canadian project trying to increase the visibility of COVID-19 related research in Canada. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you, and if you're, please go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Can everybody see the screen now?
Yes.
Good, good, okay. Yeah, well, thank you to, well, first greetings, I guess, to everyone watching and listening. Hope you're all keeping safe and well. And thank you so much to COAR and Kathleen for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what's been happening in Canada. I think one of many examples of engaged repository communities who've been seeking to respond to some of the challenges presented by COVID-19 and its impact on research, learning, and global health. So as Kathleen said, my name's Jeff Harder, Associate University Librarian at the University of Alberta, which is in Edmonton, Canada. Along with Talia Chung, the University Librarian and Vice Provost at the University of Ottawa, I co-chair the Canadian Association of Research Libraries Open Repositories Working Group, or as we call it, ORWG. Our working group's been attempting to move as quickly as possible to help track and amplify COVID-19 related research that's being funded and undertaken in Canada or by Canadian researchers. So I'll be the one reporting on some of that work today, but I would like to give credit to all of the repository metadata and technical colleagues across the country who've been really the ones who are helping to move this initiative forward as quickly as we're able to. And in particular, just a special acknowledgement and call out to the great work being done by my working group colleagues, I think a few of whom are on this call. So a little bit about the Canadian context and what our repository environment's like. I think it's best described as a mosaic of different repositories, many institutionally based, as you might expect, but others domain and format based and so forth. As in other parts of the world, we're seeing a growing breadth of content types being homed in these repositories, from publications and theses to raw and processed data. A lot more attention is being paid to the research data that supports the research and scholarship happening across the country than ever before. I know something that is not unique to just Canada. Our Open Repositories Working Group represents an attempt to bring a higher degree of harmonization and coordinated action to all of our individual institutional repository strategies and plans and local operations. We're looking to I think, achieve a goal of building a strengthened community network of repositories by facilitating a clearer sense of purpose and direction that really will allow our sum to be greater than its parts, as they say. So, that is to work together towards common goals, shared purpose, using both top-down approaches as well as bottom-up. As one of the working group's early undertakings in preceding any hint of the impending COVID pandemic that we're in right now, through COAR, we had formed a partnership with the Europe's OpenAIRE Advance initiative, which you've just heard some information about. The goal of that was really to increase the profile of Canadian repositories, while at the same time enabling some better insights into Canadian research activity and publication. The project involves the harvest of Canadian repository content into OpenAIRE. So, no small feat for a country with a very distributed and largely institutionally based mosaic of repositories. But I can report that this project is very much moving forward, also a work in progress, but I think we're realizing how timely this activity is now, especially as we look at opportunities to, for example, aggregate COVID-related Canadian research. So many concrete actions and steps are underway. A majority of Canadian repositories, for example, the majority of Canadian repositories do use DSpace. And so the Open Repositories Working Group, along with Queen's University and a number of other organizations, contracted with the company For Science to develop what was recently being this summer, but a recently announced DSpace 5 and 6 extension for compliance with the OpenAIRE version 4 guidelines for repository managers. So actions like that help set the stage for what we hope to do with our COVID aggregation work. So before getting into further project details about the COVID aggregation project, I think it's important just to pause and really understand why we would embark upon this work. The global challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, as Kathleen and other people have suggested, make clear how important it is for the world to have timely and unimpeded access to information, data, the outcomes of research. It's really a time for us to be active, to rally our communities, to join global efforts around open science, and the rapid advances that will hopefully counter the negative impacts of the pandemic. We know that libraries and research institutions across the country have made significant investments over time in repositories and our archives. So it's timely to, one, both highlight and make the most of the relevant research and insights that have or will be openly shared and archived. And then two, also to pay some attention to the research and knowledge that continues to remain locked behind paywalls and other gateways and barriers, potentially slowing down and impeding the advancement of pandemic-related solutions and our global knowledge building. So Canadian libraries have paid close attention to all of the global conversations happening around ownership and the control of scholarly communication, looking, I think, to try to move the needle on our investments towards academy-owned, open infrastructure and away from monopoly-controlled corporate entities. While on aggregate spending in the 2018-2019 fiscal year in Canada was approximately $23 million Canadian. That represents a relatively modest sum as opposed to, I think, our aggregate spending on broader collections. But it nevertheless, I think, reflects a beginning for what many of us hope will be a pendulum swing in the way we conceive of and fund scholarly communications. One of the key findings of a recent CARL report tells us what I think we already know, which is really that collective approaches, as opposed to sometimes individual and piecemeal efforts, are likely to have a greater impact. And so this is part of the driver and motivation behind the work that we're attempting to undertake. So as is happening around the world, much new and enhanced government funding is being redirected towards COVID-related research. This is, of course, also true in Canada. A recent news report from one of our networks, Global TV, suggested that in the last 6 months, the Government of Canada has announced funding of over 1 billion Canadian dollars targeted towards research and vaccine development related to COVID-19. This is the equivalent to 650 million euros, 750 million US roughly. So with that much money on the table, it seems obvious why Canada's 3 major federal funding agencies, they are in health, natural sciences and engineering, and social sciences and humanities would be very interested in tracking their funded research and the impact that it's having. Their interest in trying to track that funding has greatly intensified as they've been directing such significant amounts towards COVID-19 and looking to better monitor and present to policymakers any early research results of those investments. But we know that the tracking of funding as it relates to research outcomes and the data generated and the data analyzed and what's being used presents a lot of challenges still, and there's often a disconnect with the funding agencies being unable to easily track and correlate research to funded projects. Third-party corporations are, of course, eager to help out with that problem, but it seems quite sensible that there might be greater opportunities to bring funders and research organizations more closely together, potentially using our digital repositories as one of the important pieces of the puzzle, not the only piece, but one of those pieces of our puzzle. So, as a repository and research library community, a vital part of the scholarly communication system, we're both trying to be proactive as well as responsive to the environment we find ourselves in. As I said, looking to work bottom up as well as top down in terms of putting into motion a number of actions and activities that help move us closer towards shared goals. One of our strategies has been to directly engage and work with the research funders themselves to better understand what their needs are, to better understand what is being funded and how those outputs are being disseminated. The funding agencies will be providing us with the information that we need as repositories to better link research funding awards to the researchers who are actually doing and sharing research, so that we in turn are better positioned to support deposit and ingest, as well as the sharing and curation of relevant content into and out of Canadian repositories based on things like COAR's basic recommendations on metadata. With a number of different repositories and platforms in use in Canada, it's foreseeable that many institutions will face a challenge both getting their metadata into OpenAIRE compliant form and possibly having the ability to identify their COVID-related research in their repository, resources being what they are. So to help address those problems, or at least issue number one, we felt that the quickest solution might be to establish a lightweight national aggregator for our repositories, one source that OpenAIRE would be able to pull from. So this is a good example, I think, of work from the ground up, where we were able to quickly establish an instance of DSpace at one of our institutions, and we have McMaster University and Gabriella on this call to thank for stepping forward to take up that charge. So now we're in a position where those willing repositories can be harvested by a central Canadian DSpace instance, which then can feed up to the OpenAIRE Gateway and simplify the process. The working group's currently in the process of trying to map out those workflows so that we're best able to communicate them. Obviously, we need to do some testing, and this is, again, one of those examples of a work in progress. A few different scenarios have been mapped out. Under scenario one, a repository manager would ensure that their own repository is OpenAIRE compliant with the literature guidelines for version 4. So this is really a direct harvest out of an individual repository as opposed to the national one. The payoff there for that work is that the benefits from things like full text mining and the OpenAIRE aggregation, access to usage statistics and other value-added services provided by OpenAIRE would be available. The cons or the challenges there are it requires some additional effort and development work at the level of the institutional repository for the repository platform. A bit simpler under scenario 2, the instance of DSpace at McMaster University, what we're calling Canada Research, will be able to harvest metadata records from the individual institutional repositories on a regularized cycle. So at this point, I think we're feeling fairly confident that DSpace instance will be able to harvest from a variety of different repository platforms, including DSpace, ePrints, Content DM, Islandora, as well as some of our homegrown, custom-built repository platforms. So the editing process for these different scenarios might look a little bit different. Under scenario 2, a repository manager, themselves could, or with their team, could curate the metadata in Canada Research. Once the records are harvested by the Canada Research platform, the local repository manager then would be encouraged to curate the metadata in the central aggregator in order to add some granular funding information, for example, in compliance with the OpenAIRE guidelines. This has the benefit of allowing that granular funding information to be included. The drawbacks then are that if, for example, we do need to decommission the Canada Research platform and that project comes to an end, then that enhanced metadata may be lost. Although we're fairly confident that there would be options there for metadata export to happen. Another scenario would be that the repository manager curates the metadata in their own IR. And so that would look like the repository manager ensuring that minimum metadata elements are included in the records in the local IR. The aggregator then picks up those changes during one of the subsequent harvests. And that would allow, the enhanced metadata to stay within the original record. The drawbacks there would be that for non-OpenAIRE compliant RRs, this option might not allow adding, things like granular funding information, for example. So a variety of different, in short, a variety of different workflows are being considered. Just to shift gears a little bit and talk about the research data management or research data repository landscape, a somewhat similar strategy is happening on the research data side. So we'll be using a pre-existing national aggregator and data repository, something we refer to as FRDR, FRDR, our Federated Research Data Repository. So FRDR addresses a long-standing gap in Canada's research infrastructure by providing us with a single platform from which research data can be ingested, curated, preserved, discovered, cited, shared. The platform's federated search tool provides a focal point to discover and access Canadian research data, while a range of services provided by the larger umbrella of FRDR and something called Portage help researchers store and manage their data, preserve their research for future use, and comply with institutional and funding agency data management requirements. So much as with the institutional repositories, FRDR is also working to achieve OpenAIRE compliance and ensure that Canadian research data becomes discoverable and part of the larger view of OpenAIRE's COVID-19 research aggregation. And so ultimately, we hope that in relatively short order, relatively being the operative word, I guess, Canadian contributions to COVID-19 research from a variety of different disciplines and parts of the country will begin to hopefully surface in OpenAIRE's Gateway. So we've had a presentation on OpenAIRE. You have a sense of what that gateway is going to look like. This is a screen cap of what the OpenAIRE COVID Canada viewer gateway would look like. Again, very much a work in progress. We know that there's still a large discrepancy in terms of funder-affiliated content between Scopus and Web of Science and what we would find in OpenAIRE. So part of that work in the fall will be to address this and help to shrink that gap. So lots of work still to be done, but everyone is working very quickly to try to pull together the details. A communication plan is in motion. It outlines a path for connecting with more senior leaders of organizations to get them on side, as well as, of course, repository folks and teams on the ground who are the folks who really are responsible for the mechanics of the work involved. Part of those communications is talking about the logistics and workflows, but a part of what we're attempting to address too is really the value proposition behind why this work is so important. We also hope to support communications with research services offices at all of our different organizations, so that we can strengthen the links between research that's being funded and conducted and the role of repositories in helping to openly share and preserve those outputs. This reminds me of Peter's point about ensuring that our repositories are not just places where content goes to be archived, but also places where content goes to be actively used. Certainly, there are risks to these projects and things that we're monitoring. One risk to the project is that, of course, we aren't able to move quickly enough, and that we see vaccines and a resolution to the pandemic before we really have this project fully off the ground. However, I think we seem to be in general agreement that we're learning a lot about the gaps in our research lifecycle, the disconnect between funders and the tracking of research outputs. We're, I think, seeing examples of a rather siloed design of our repository landscape and how that can be improved. The challenges of keeping a pace with things like good metadata and grant-related information and research information for us to all be working from. All of these things teach us lessons that will help us in our longer-term work that extends well beyond the time of COVID. So we're I think, excited and at peace with the process and ready to learn as we go. So there are more details about COVID and Canadian repository work in general, which you can find on the Canadian Association of Research Libraries website. And I think that's where I will stop. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeff, for that interesting presentation. And there was a comment in the chat that said, now that's community building. So, and I think that's exactly what we need to do, is build community, first at the national level, then at the regional level, and then internationally. So I hope what you're doing can be a model for some other countries that are not collaborating very closely at the moment. There's a general question here in the chat from Peter, and I welcome you to take a stab at it, and maybe I can also respond to it. He's asking, is there evidence that researchers or citizens value the aggregation of resources in COVID or Zika portals? Would you like to respond to that, Jeff?
I can. I don't know if I have a very satisfactory answer for that. I think we're, from my point of view, I'm not sure. I think I would elevate the need to be one of, it's critical, I think, that we work to improve discovery across the board for research in general, but including the content that we find in our repositories. A lot of our focus has really been around those archiving activities and getting materials in. I think we're very much in a phase where we need to put a lot more investment into ensuring that we're surfacing content as broadly as possible. And so that means, allowing it to find its way into a variety of different gateways. One of the bigger ones being search engines like Google, down to potentially doorways like OpenAIRE and elsewhere. I think to some degree remains to be seen in terms of the researchers themselves and how those gateways fit into their workflows and patterns. You know, for some of these portals that we're building may be a first stopping point. For others, you know, it may pass them by and they have no regularized routine of checking and going through them. But I guess one of the values that I see in terms of some of the, well, certainly in the work of you know, large initiatives like OpenAIRE, is that it does help with that larger question of making content discoverable. It does help with normalizing things like our metadata and our access strategies and so forth, which helps serve kind of the larger purpose of discovery. So that's kind of a rambling non-answer to Peter's question, so I'll shut up now.
Yeah. I mean, I think in particular, looking at the OpenAIRE Gateway, it's more, it's probably the main use case for the OpenAIRE Gateway and for the Canadian project is for funders to be able to track research outputs that they've funded, because one of the relationships that they're building in through their graph is the relationship between the funder and the various different types of research outputs. But I do think the fact that we're working on collaborating together is laying the groundwork to develop these other types of value-added services in the future that would be more beneficial for researchers. Maybe we're not quite there yet, but I think this is building the groundwork for that. So I hope that the types of services that we begin to develop over the next 5 years related to repositories become more researcher focused. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, here we have a question from Miguel. Are there specific projects that harvest specific information from repositories? Some examples that you know of? Well, I think there are projects, Miguel. For example, there are the regional networks that we've been, such as OpenAIRE in Latin America. There's La Referencia. So there are a number of regional and national projects that are harvesting metadata from repositories. So I can give you those as examples. And what we're trying to support at COAR is data sharing across those regional networks. So we have international aggregations rather than only regional aggregations. But in terms of possibly domain projects, I'm not aware of very many. Perhaps others are. Any other questions? If not, just like to say thank you very much, Jeff. Really appreciate you presenting the project that you guys are working on, and I'm part of it too. And I look forward to the progress you're making in the next couple of months around aggregation into OpenAIRE.
Thanks, Kathleen.
And thanks again. And by the way, you know, if anybody's out there listening to this and they have questions about these various projects, I'm sure our presenters would be happy to respond by email, or you can send a message to me and I can forward those questions. Again, COAR is all about collaboration, information sharing, international interoperability. So we really welcome you to learn from the various projects that we have highlighted today. And again, we may follow up with more projects in the future. So the next thing I'd like to do is just take you through a very, very short presentation related to COVID-19 and open science, based on some small research that I did in terms of what is the impact of COVID-19 on open science. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation of the session, we'll have an interactive component using the Mentimeter program. So let me share my slides with you. And just confirming that you can see them. And now I have to move the pictures here. I have to move the Zoom slideshow. Whoop. I don't understand why these Zoom. There we go. Okay, if I'm assuming it's in full screen now.
Yes.
Great, thanks. So I think one of the things that was highlighted by the previous presenters and that we've been seeing more generally is that COVID-19 has put a real spotlight on open science. And it's no longer you know, something, a principle around open science. People are really beginning to understand the value, the benefits, and why open science is so important. One of the things that we saw early on in the pandemic was, well, not so early on, but early enough on, is governments calling for open access to COVID-19 publications. There were a group of open science ministers or science ministers who called for open access to publications in March. The Wellcome Trust called on publishers to make their content openly available actually as early as February. And Horizon 2020 provided more details around what they were recommending in April. And essentially, these various funders and governments were asking for several things. One was that articles should be deposited immediately into preprint servers even before they were published. Once they're published, they should be made immediately open access. All research data and other protocols and so on underlying articles should be made available, and that there should be open licenses attached to this content to support text and data mining. And I think this has led to a significant change around scholarly publishing related to COVID-19. This is a study that looked at the delay or the time from submission to acceptance of COVID-19 articles and the time from acceptance to publication. And it's just incredible the difference between COVID-19 articles and regular articles. So for example, they compared COVID-19 articles with MERS, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. And the median time for submission to acceptance of a COVID-19 article was 5 days, compared to 71.5 days for MERS articles. And then the median time for acceptance to publication of COVID-19 articles is 5 days. So that makes, on average, a time from submission to publication of just 10 days. And this is incredibly, a lot faster than what we would find in any other research topic. This is a study that looked at the percentage of articles that are openly available related to COVID-19. And they found that 97% of articles related to COVID, well, here they say 75% are openly available compared to non-COVID-19 articles, which are 32%. So that's also a significant difference. The publishers have responded to the call by governments and funders to make their COVID-19 related articles openly available. Many of them, and if you go to this spreadsheet that's managed by ICALC, which is the International Coalition of Library Consortia, they're maintaining a list of all of the publishers that have agreed to make their content available. And you can see here that, unfortunately, some of those publishers have already closed content, so they made it available for several months, and it's being closed again, or they plan to close access to content, you know, in the coming months. We've also seen a huge increase in preprints. This was from the early days of the pandemic, but you can see there are more preprints than publications related to coronavirus. I did a kind of search on Europe PubMed Central to compare a number of preprints in 2020 related to COVID-19, which were 16.46%, whereas when I searched cancer for 2020, only 4% are of the contents available in preprints. So that's a significant difference. And then something that was mentioned by Ambreen and or perhaps Gita, you know, there's now so many papers being produced that researchers are having great difficulty in terms of keeping up to date with the new findings related to COVID-19. So you may have seen the COAR-19, which is a COVID-19 open research data set, which it's called a data set, but it's really an aggregation of all the literature related to COVID-19 into one large open access database. And I'm wondering also if OpenAIRE is harvesting this, or whether also our colleagues from Cambridge and India have thought about using this data set as well. And I'd just like to point out that, you know, these kind of aggregations that are really set up for text and data mining would not be possible without open access to the research literature. So we're increasingly seeing how important, in a very concrete, pragmatic way, why open science and open access are really important. But the question is, will we go back to business as usual once the pandemic is over? Or, as we've seen, some publishers are already going back to business as usual. Robert Jan Smits said recently, and he was one of the lead architects of Plan S, he said, let's turn this abnormal situation in which COVID-19 related papers and data are shared widely into a normal situation. Or Vincent Larivière, who's based here in Canada, a professor at the University of Montreal, says, how can we now justify not making research on cancer or cardiovascular diseases freely accessible as well? So I'd like to finish my presentation to say, I mean, all other types of research really deserve to be treated in the same way. And imagine what we could do. Imagine the problems we could solve in a much more rapid and innovative way if we did have complete open access to all literature and research data. And so with that, I'm going to take you over to Mentimeter. What you can do is in your browser, go to www.menti.com and use this code. And I'm going to switch over now to the Mentimeter slides, and the code will be at the top in case you don't catch it now. And we're going to go through some questions, some interactive questions together. So now I need to move these again. There. Whoop. So some people are already here. And the first question is, what best describes your role?
We are still seeing your PowerPoint slides.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let me stop sharing. Share screen. How's that?
Great.
Excellent. So the only question is, I'm not sure how to. I'm just going to do this first. Whoops. So we start here. What best describes your role? So just out of interest, who are the people attending this forum? So we have 9 librarians, researchers, that's good. Repository managers and others. So we have 42 participants, so I'll wait a little longer. Still missing a few. Okay, so I'm interested in the other category. I wonder if you're not one of these, could you put your role into the Zoom chat? I'm just noticing a comment by Peter that mentions that 58% of the COVID papers in COVID-19 are closed. So that's interesting.
Yes, this was today from Alex Wade. He used to be in Microsoft, he's now with CZI, and okay. Alex blogged these things today, so it's worth reading anyway.
Thank you very much for that. Very interesting. And
yes, this is something. Yeah, this is something that as OpenAIRE, probably we would like to double check also using Unpaywall and the other sources. And we have, I mean, this huge network of repositories that we are using. So we may find the post-print open access anyway from the repositories. So yeah, I think that we should look into it. Because we have COVID-19 not explicitly in our aggregation, meaning that we collected the DOIs of those publications from BibFinder, which is another composite dataset of COVID-19 publications. So if we are able to identify which of those come from COVID-19, I think we could run a nice analysis on this. So thank you, Peter, for this information.
Very interesting. Okay, so we've got 32 responses, quite a few others, which is interesting. So librarians, 11 librarians, 8 researchers, 3 repository managers, 1 publisher, and several others. And there's Serge, who says he's headquarters of RPO, Library Open System Designer. Okay, but let's move on to the next question. Now, I'm hoping this is going to work by me just doing this. So where are you based? We have, those are all our Indian participants from Asia Pacific who are staying up very late to participate in our forum. We are much appreciated.
Thank you. No, it's been thoroughly enjoyable, all the talks, even this this questionnaire.
Okay. So we have nobody from Central or South America. I did see 1 participant from Africa, so Omo, but maybe he's not here anymore. Okay, you can continue to fill those in, but I'll keep moving on because we've only got 14 minutes left. So has COVID-19 increased awareness of the value of open science in your local context? So most people say yes, it has, but some people don't know. And one person says it hasn't increased awareness, which is unfortunate. And Simon says in the chat, yes, awareness of open science, but not enough. So how can we amplify that message? I think this is a time, an opportune time to amplify the message of the importance of open science. Okay, the next question is, whoops, let me try and let me see if there, can you see that? Whoops.
The question changed on our browsers, but we don't see anymore your screen.
Okay, thank you. Let me try and share it again. Share screen. Can you see it now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and this is what's on your browsers. Are you participating in activities related to sharing of COVID-19 research outputs? Well, of course, all of our presenters are. Okay, so more than 50%, about 65% of people are. Just not sure how to move my screen forward. There we go. So this is an open text question, just to get an idea of what the COVID-19 related activities are that you're working on. And they should come up in kind of bubbles as you respond. Online training. Reading through the OpenAIRE Gateway research. Repository mining, communication, reading and dissemination work, procrastination. More papers on bioRxiv, the OpenAIRE Gateway, preprint repository, overview in my country, building a website for sharing COVID-19 data, reading and learning. Use the opportunity to show that academia needs to build and control commons of knowledge. Giving health workers access to learning materials, research articles, learning to work online. sharing, highlighting, improving sharing of COVID-19 data, aggregating semantic content, tracking local legislation, publishing and posting research quickly, harmonizing metadata for easy discovery, creating canned searches, building communities, support for faculty for digitized course readings, supporting research to repository, copyright guidance, Netflix, harnessing social media, online training, OpenAIRE, connecting countries, track and trace systems. Wow, that's a lot of different things. Directory of open access information sources, amplifying our message through social media. Great. And now I will take us to the second last question. What are your major challenges related to open science and COVID-19? Copyright and licensing of papers, yeah. Infrastructure, restricted data, copyright embargoes, metadata, attitude change, connectivity, lack of funding, data normalization. Time, resources, attention, yeah. Time management, yeah. Yeah, all of those things resonate. Infrastructure, awareness of open science, research data, management, open textbook. Okay, and to be fair, yes, that's a lot of work to apply the FAIR recommendations, lack of technical know-how. Mm-hmm. So this moves into our next question, which is what I will leave you with as a final question. What can COAR do to help advance open science in your local context? So if you're thinking about some of the challenges you have, please give us some suggestions of how we can help. Amplify our stories. Awareness. Keep on the good work. Continue organizing online events like this one. Okay. No closed access to resources and repositories. Involve more faculty advocates, support awareness. Build a stronger community who can advocate for open access. Emphasize outreach. Update the resource type control vocabulary. Thank you. We're working on that actually to improve the vocabulary to better represent data sets. Single point of search for the world. Build a bigger community. training, case studies, success stories from different countries. Funding agencies through awareness. Undertake surveys to assess efforts in this regard. Awareness about groups or projects that require support of some sort. Summaries of success to support resource requests. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. It's coming to the end of our 2-hour forum. I really appreciate your input that you've given through Mentimeter and your questions that you included in the chat. I want to say thank you so much again to our presenters today. They were really interesting presentations. Let's, as somebody says in the chat, let's stay connected, and I agree. Let's continue to stay connected. And COAR will use your recommendations and your input to try to build on the activities we're already working on now. So thank you very much again for attending the forum, and I hope you have a nice afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much again.